Welcome, dear listeners, to Satanists Next Door. We're your hosts, Lilin
And Tommy Levine.
Whether you're an open-minded, curious onlooker or a fellow Satanist seeking camaraderie, our goal is to share our personal experiences and delve into the intricate tapestry of Satanism in our daily lives, occasionally inviting other guests to share their unique perspectives, leaving no pentagram unturned. We'll explore how our beliefs shape our views on society, dive into struggles and triumphs we've encountered, and reveal the humanity that unites us all. So grab your favorite chalice and join us on this captivating journey. Satanists Next Door is ready to peel back the curtain and offer you a glimpse into our world, one captivating episode at a time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Satanists Next Door. Today we're gonna touch on a subject we've talked about before, which is abortion. But with this one, there's some new happenings here in Texas, and so we thought we would dig in a little bit deeper to kind of discuss what they're trying to do here in Texas, and which I assume, because Texas is kind of like the testing point for a lot of these things, what you may see coming to a state near you.
Well, and it's important to notice that it's not just Texas. This same thing is going on in other states. There were two mentioned specifically, I believe. I'm trying to remember now. It was Iowa, I think. There were some other states mentioned, and I will find that information and clarify.
Yeah.
But definitely what they're doing here is an interesting model, and a model that should concern everyone.
Yeah, very much so. So you can actually find this entire, bit of information on the Texas Tribune. There's an article called "Texas Highways Are the Next Anti-Abortion Target. Mm-hmm. One town is resisting." And yeah, so they're, if I get that and Lilin, kind of, if I've understood this wrong, let me know. But they're basically trying to build this like invisible wall around these states so that if you drive down the highways, and you cross into one of these counties while bringing somebody to leave the state for an abortion, then all of a sudden you can be on the hook.
Yeah, so they have different jurisdictions that are border adjacent communities, and each of these towns are being approached by incredibly conservative individuals, one in particular who is leading the charge, to ensure that there is essentially a tattletale law which would pit citizens against citizens, so that when individuals who are seeking abortion care, who would go to states like New Mexico, where there is still opportunity for people to receive that care, they would, if they stop, or if people had a suspicion, or, things like that, people could then take down their information and then attempt to civilly, as individuals, just try to sue them personally, which takes the state off the hook in that they can't necessarily go after the state itself. It then makes the burden placed on the individuals, which leads to a lot of other concerning considerations.
Yeah, I mean, and this kind of one-ups the tattletale law we already have here on the books in Texas, in the sense that, Greg Abbott, what do I want to call? Never mind. I won't even go into what I want to call Greg Abbott.
The holy roller from hell.
Yeah. He put in that whole tattletale sort of law with the abortion ban, but this takes it like that step further, where they're actually looking at any way that you can get out of a state. You think you take normal highways, or there's junctions or things like that. And if it passes through one of those counties, if one of those junctions or one of those highways, like I-10 in Texas or something like that, if it passes through one of those counties, then they're like, ooh, we need to target all these counties. And so it's either like an invisible border, or it's like this sort of invisible screen going down these highways that each one of these communities have passed. And yeah, it's civil right now, but it's concerning to me because I read the tea leaves on a lot of these things, and I could see, depending on the way politics goes and our Supreme Court and all that sort of shit goes, these things turning from just civil. But even being civil, I mean, in Texas, you can't the way that the law was set up in Texas is if somebody sues you for helping somebody with an abortion and you win the case, you can't get your fees back.
Right. But the important thing is, the individual seeking the abortive care cannot be pursued legally, period. Yeah. This law and a lot of the other laws only allow pursuit of legal action by civil individuals, citizens like yourself and myself, against the people that are helping them. And that means anybody that's driving a car, providing financial assistance, any kind of a support system that helps them to seek abortive care is then allowed to be sued by individuals who disagree. And I want to point out that there have not been any such suits brought. And I believe there are a lot of reasons behind this. I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to pontificate about all of that. But I think it's important to note that there have not been. And I think part of that is because there is not a real successful way forward when it really comes down to it. And I just don't know that there's more to it than trying to use a fear tactic to instill confusion and just general fear of trying to do this. So it's a mental control.
They're trying to. They know. Okay, we've gone as far as we can with stopping the person from getting the abortion. So who do we target now? Well, now we target anybody that is pro-choice. Or is trying to help a person. So literally the way that this reads is if you were bringing somebody, say, out of state to New Mexico for an abortion.
Or even providing funding. I want to make sure that,
that's
any
what
kind
I was going to get at. And I was going to say, hey, here's $5. Would you give Susie, would you stop at McDonald's and get Susie some lunch on the way? Because I gave that $5 to help feed Susie on the way. I'm on the hook now. Somebody could technically say, hey, you helped this happen because you gave Susie lunch when she was leaving to go get an abortion.
Right.
And that's fucked up.
Right. But this is creating essentially a private citizen watch group all along the border. And it's, again, not just Texas, but it's very strong in Texas. They know they have a lot of conservative communities along these border towns. So they're utilizing that and the support for conservative ideals to help strengthen these very intimidating tactics that are meant to psychologically restrain people from seeking care.
Now, the one positive thing I found about this article was that I think, and I truly believe, they're starting to push this too far. They're pushing it far enough that even conservatives, even some anti-abortion advocates are like, whoa, hold on. This is like, look, we've already got the law in place that somebody can't. Now you're going after people for trying to help a person, and they use the terminology he uses in here. This asshole's name is Dickinson or Dixon.
Name, yeah.
Dixon. Yeah, his last name's Dixon. And he uses the terminology trafficking. If you're abortion trafficking, which that's so beyond fucked up because it gives a vision like you've kidnapped this person and you're trying, because that's what trafficking is.
It's taking someone against their will to participate in something they don't have any desire to participate in. And I have to be very clear, when individuals are being brought to another state for abortion care, if someone is being pushed into that against their will, I am completely opposed to it. Again, pro-choice means the choice of the person seeking the care. And if they don't want that care, then there's no reason anyone should be trying to force them to receive that care. However, if people are in a situation where they want that care, they have every right to seek it and to utilize any resource at their exposed, including individuals who are willing to help them to do that. The cost of traveling outside of state is astronomical, especially when you look at the people that are typically affected by these bans. So you're talking about people that live in marginalized communities. You're talking about people that often don't have a lot of financial resources. These are the people that are most affected by this. So time off work, child care for existing children, gas money, the cost of the abortion itself, which usually there are some funds out there to help. But again, this is going to be impacted by these civil suits, and transportation funds that are provided will also. So the person taking them is at risk. And Florida is doing something similar, and you see it is affecting a community there. The migrant community down there is being heavily affected because individuals who transport them are being held accountable for that transport and face legal ramifications for that transport. This is the same thing they're trying to do here with pregnant individuals seeking abortive care.
Yeah. And like you said, there's all sorts of costs that people don't think about, especially now that you have to travel out of state. I mean, likely Texas is a big state. If you don't know and you've never tried to drive through Texas, it's a huge state. You're likely going to have to stop for a hotel room,
or sleeping. I'm telling you, this is a traumatic situation for people, and not just in the state of Texas, but in particular, when you look at the rural communities where a lot of these individuals are really going to be struggling with the inaccessibility here. Mm-hmm. This is a heart-breaking situation that we're dealing with. These are people that, again, they already usually have children, and if they don't, they also are dealing with other things, with financial things. Work is not going to just let you off the hook for a week. And let's be honest, you have to get time to get there. Oftentimes, because of additional burdens placed on individuals seeking this care, you have to receive a pre-visit. You have to go through some kind of conversation. You have to wait on it, sometimes 24 to 48 hours, depending on the state where you're able to get care. These burdens are put in place for a reason. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes money. You have to have somewhere to stay. These individuals need time to recover. Abortion, while it is a health care right that we should all have, is a very demanding process. It is very physically and psychologically difficult, regardless what people might think, for people who choose that care. They know it's the right thing for them. Again, they should never be forced. Never, never, never be in a situation where they're forced to do it knowing that it's not what they want. That's not okay.
Yeah, as somebody who's pro-choice, I will fight just as hard for a woman that wants to keep her pregnancy and somebody is trying to force her to have an abortion as I will for somebody who is pregnant and does not want that pregnancy. So pro-choice means choice. You have the choice either way. And that sometimes seems to get lost even on the pro-choice side. I've seen people get upset because we were following somebody on social media, and what they do is they kind of help bring people to different clinics. And I think she was telling the story as one of the time the woman changed her mind, and she was like, okay, that's okay, that's your choice, that's part of pro-choice. You can change your mind, and that's fine. I'll bring you back, and if you change your mind again or you want to go through, call me. And some people actually got upset at her, and it was like, and she was arguing, hold on, guys. Pro-choice doesn't mean we're forcing abortions on people. It means pro-choice. The person has the choice. She changed her mind of her own will and decided she wanted to keep it, and that's fine. And that's what we should be fighting for, is allowing the person who is pregnant to make that choice. That is the only person that matters.
Right. It is a very outspoken social account that does help people that want transportation to these appointments. And it's they're not only providing the transportation, but they're a bit of moral support because, it is a very demanding thing. Even if it's the right choice for you, there's a lot that goes into it. Either way, it is a life-changing decision. You have a child or you choose to end the pregnancy and not have a child. And that's so important to remember, that either way, it is something that will be a life-changing decision for you. And it should be something that you put a lot of consideration into, because it is something that, you have to consider how you're going to feel years down the road. And the plus side is the majority of people who do this of their own volition are very happy with the decision that they made, because they knew it was the right thing for them at that point in their life, and they couldn't provide, for whatever reason, the necessary environment to proceed forward with a pregnancy.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem that I have too. I mean, beyond where they've taken the minimum time down on some of these to just things that are unrealistic, like 6 weeks or 4 weeks. You don't even, most people don't even know they're pregnant at that point, But when you bring the time down, you also bring the time down that the person has to actually think about, do they want this or not? They are rushed into a judgment one way or the other. And somebody could make the wrong decision either way,
right? Because
they are rushed. And it's like, science is pretty clear on like when a nervous system, is in place, when the heartbeat, the heartbeat laws are bullshit, because it's not actually the heart
No, it's a sound created by the machine, recognizing electrical impulses. So yeah, there's electrical impulses happening, but it is not in the way that you or I understand a heart structure, an existing heart.
Yeah.
And I do want to make a clarification and a correction. It wasn't Iowa, it was Idaho. So the states that have laws like this or have tried to push laws like this was Missouri. They would have allowed any private citizen to sue anyone who helped a Missouri resident secure an abortion, regardless of where the abortion occurred. And then the other one was Idaho, which became the first state to impose criminal penalties on anyone who helps a minor leave the state for an abortion without parental consent. That is troubling to me because sometimes minors are seeking care for incest-related abuse happening in a home. You're not very well going to get support from the people that are abusing you.
Yeah, the person that raped you isn't going to be like, oh yeah, hey, this is a good idea. Yeah, I mean, and so that's the problem. That's the other problem I have with these laws. I know right now a lot of these are civil, but if you look at the way that the Christian nationalist and the anti-abortion folks have worked is over years, they don't go for the target that they have immediately. They do it in little tiny steps. And so once you make it civil, then that's your first step that, okay, we're on our way to eventually make it criminal. And civil's bad enough, but once we turn the corner and try and make something like this criminal, then holy shit, all bets are off. I mean,
and the gentleman doing this, his name is Mark Lee Dixon. He is an anti-abortion activist. He's been working on a lot of the laws that you see coming out, including the ones that have passed, very much hands-on with all this stuff. And they do have the wherewithal to understand chipping away at it over time is just as valuable as trying to do it in one sweeping motion.
Yeah. And I mean, I will give it to the Christian nationalists, the GOP, all of them. They're very good at just chipping away. They know that they won't get the whole thing at once, and they have patience, and they'll just slowly chip away at these things and get one law, then get another, then another, and another, and another. And then you're 10 years down the road, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, how did that happen? It happened one little bitty law at a time.
Yeah. And I do have to hand it to the person in this story because the one that they focus on is a very conservative individual who is still very open-minded. They sit on the council in that community that is being affected. And they were opposed to enacting this because they felt like it was unfair for them to impose their particular viewpoints and ideology on people who may not hold the same thing. And I respect that. And what really bothered me is this individual also owns a consignment shop. And I'm not going to say who they are. You can go read the story because they don't necessarily want to be associated with us. I understand that. But I do applaud what they're doing. But they own a consignment shop, and one of the things that the extreme conservatives within the community who disagreed with them not pushing this were like, well, we know where you work, and we'll affect your business, and blah, 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 blah. And that's another way that they enact this type of extreme...
It's tyranny.
It is tyranny. Other communities went through this, and then the actual, groups that were pushing back against it or people that sat on government boards were removed.
Yeah, imagine that. Oh, you didn't vote the way that we wanted? Okay, well, we're going to remove you. Hey, we're slowly moving towards theocracy, one board at a time, one law at a time, just slowly kind of getting there. And everybody's like, fucking ignoring it. And it's like, oh, no, it's not really that big of a deal. Okay, well, when it becomes that, then, shut the fuck up because you had your option and you had your chance and you didn't listen. Yeah, I mean, I applaud this individual, not the one trying to pass the law, but this individual that's on this board, because if everybody thought that same way, I don't have a right to push my ideology on other people. Hello, that's choice. That's the only thing that people are asking for, whether it's when it comes to abortion, gay marriage, anything like that. They're just asking for choice.
Right.
They're
and it comes down to, well, what about the choice of, when it comes to abortion laws, what about the fetus or no, it's utilizing another human being to sustain it. And that human being has a right to decide if their body is capable and if they themselves are willing to expose themselves to all of the risks, which is stroke, diabetes, blood clots, heart conditions, pain and discomfort, which, yeah, that's something, sure, you can mitigate to a degree. But
Loss of a sex life.
Loss of your work. A lot of people who become pregnant, if they're not working in certain positions, they will be fired because pregnancy is seen as something that impedes their ability to actually do their job. They won't have childcare. They won't have financial services. They won't be able to afford healthcare. They can't already, afford the life that they are living at this point. It puts them at an unnecessary additional strain. A lot of the people voting to take away these rights are also not voting to provide additional healthcare, medical care, leave, child care, any of the necessary things, good education. I mean, here we are trying to recreate segregation politics by creating voucher programs, which we know are specifically designed to further segregate communities. And, when you start looking at the bigger picture, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to go back to the 1950s.
No, it's not Leave It to fucking Beaver. And we've kind of talked about that before. And they in schools, they no longer, at least in many states, in many of the conservative states, they no longer teach sex ed. So that is a window into what they're trying to do nationally. And it's interesting to me that when they first overturned Roe v. Wade, they were like, bring it to the states. It's states' rights. Well, now that they're losing at the state level, they've thrown this on the ballot. And every time they've thrown it on the ballot at a state level, even in the most conservative states, they've lost.
Yeah.
And so now they're like, we need a national federal ban. Wait, hold on. What the fuck? So in the very beginning, you were saying, bring it to the states, bring it to the states, bring it to the states. It's not working at the states. Oh, let's bring it to the federal level.
Right. And it just shows you the hypocritical nature. It's not about the fact that they thought it's what most people wanted. They thought they were going to win by pushing it and bullying people and trying to say, well, we're not saying that the government should decide. We're just saying that, at a state level, the states should decide what they will and won't allow. And when we're talking about the state, we shouldn't be talking about state legislators. We should be talking about the constituents, the people that put legislators in their positions. Mm-hmm. Those are the places that should be allowed to vote, those people, those individuals that build and make that community, that put these people in their seats, not, oh, I voted for so-and-so, and yeah, he has an abortion opinion, but, really, it was all the combination of things that I wanted them, not, I knew they were pro-life, and I voted for, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to try to push the fact that you knew this person you voted for was pro-life, so by default, you must hold a pro-life stance. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Put it on the ballot independently and allow every community to vote what they want and watch what happens. And if you don't like that, stop pretending. Tell everyone what you're really saying from the conservative standpoint. We want to force you to gestate a pregnancy, whether or not you want that.
Yeah, well, they basically want to force the theocracy down our throat, And
Even if we take religion out of it, let's just pretend that that's not it. It's authoritarian.
Yeah.
To sit there and impose on others based on what you, a small minority of people, and I know they're loud, I know they're aggressive, I know in a lot of ways that the rhetoric is scary, but these are still a minority group of people in this country. And if we would like to maintain a healthy balance, the rest of us who have different opinions but can agree that this should be left up to the individual have to work together, because it will not stop at abortion. I'm telling you right now, other things will begin to get affected when you start taking away people's right to privacy in their medical decisions. If you think the way insurance can influence your medical care now, think forward to what this means for the government stepping in for other things they do not agree with.
Yeah. And the most hypocritical part to me, and this is where they get people, and I'm like, do you not think, like, does the brain in your head not work? They're like, the government, we should take it away from the government and give it to the state. That's still the fucking government.
Right.
It's the state government. And so
right.
You're not taking it away from the government and giving it to the people. You're taking it away from the federal government and giving it to the state government. And then a lot of these people, post themselves as libertarians. And I'm like, you cannot be, I don't give a fuck how you rebranded it or whatever. You cannot be a libertarian and be against bodily autonomy. That is like the number one
foundational
belief. That is a foundational belief of being a libertarian, is the government cannot tell you what to or what not to do with your body. And like true libertarianism goes all the way into like drug use and sex work and all of that sort of stuff.
We're not touching on all that today.
But. Right. But what I'm saying is, like, these people, they're like, oh, I'm a libertarian, but I'm for making anti-abortion laws. You can't be a libertarian. You're not a libertarian. You're a conservative who thought that libertarian sounded cool. And so you're using that name.
Yeah.
and that title.
And I fully support anyone who doesn't want to participate in something that is legally available to a community. I fully support you. Don't do the thing. And it sounds callous because I'm told, well, but abortion does affect us. Our moral compass, blah, 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 blah. So what you're saying is you believe you have the right to push your morality onto other people's private personal decisions. Can I do the same to you? Would you be okay with that? I mean, for them, unfortunately, that would not mean a limitation on very much. But if you look at that, where are we going?
Yeah.
Who's deciding for who? Which group? What about when things shift? Because, folks, ideologically, in history, go ahead and look, things change. Mm-hmm. And what may be in power, like holding the bigger portion of society today, will shift. Will you be okay if another religious majority were to take over? Will you be okay if, other types of ideology take over? How will you navigate the environment where you've completely restricted your right to make independent individual decisions for your life?
Yeah. I mean, this to me goes all the way back to the First Amendment. You're not supposed to be pushing religion in government. You're not supposed to be basing laws off of religious doctrine. And it's ironic because a lot of the people that push this, they argue so strongly for the Second Amendment. Mm. And if you understand math, one is the most important. Like when you make out a list of things, number one is like your most important. This is the thing that I definitely want to make sure happens. So number two was the second important thing to the founders. Number one was that you are not using religion. The United States is not a theocracy. They were so adamant about that.
Because they left a tyrannical type of theocratic government. Mm-hmm. And they knew whatever might come for this country, the only way that it would remain free is to allow people to have pluralistic identities that aren't bound by one specific religious doctrine. And that's a healthy way to look at things. We have more strength being different than we do by trying to cram everyone into a belief that they do not fall into. But we have freedom of and freedom from religion. And the Second Amendment is really jacked up for me, and I'm not going to get into that here, but you touch on that. The amendment that's being affected, I think, most in this instance is the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment guarantees citizens the ability to travel from place to place. That is a freedom that we are guaranteed in our constitutional rights to pit citizens against citizens and create tattletale groups. Is essentially just creating a constitutional violation without any remedy, because you cannot necessarily fault the state of Texas for encouraging this because it's being brought by individuals. Now, I will say the AG for the state of Texas is biased at best, a criminal, in fact, and they have no problem. I mean, doing the most horrible things. We now have a law on the books where if a prosecutor chooses not to pursue an abortion claim as a legal issue and not to pursue charges against it, where it can be forced by the AG. It was, prior to that law, something that could happen. The subtle change in the language being that now it must happen, and it must happen within a certain period of time. And if they do not choose, again, where's the prosecutorial discretion, which is supposed to exist? There is no longer that.
Yeah, they took that away from the DAs.
Yeah, So now the AG has an ultimate obligation, not an opportunity. Must, instead of can, must pursue charges against these people.
Yeah. So, which now all the doctors in Texas are scared. They'll basically let a woman go septic before they help her, because they're like, fuck no, I'm not going to go to jail for the rest of my life, and it's just, it's the domino effect.
Every state needs to really think about what they're doing. Another state recently lost a child, not just children, but a cardiology specialist who worked with children, worked with a lot of people. One of the foremost cardiology specialists in the nation left a state because they had extreme anti-LGBTQ laws. They didn't feel safe in that community, and they've left. And if you think about this, we're going to start losing medical minds, very important medical minds from states. And they will all move to states that have very different, more open minded laws, more safeties and security for them. And what will happen to these other states?
Yeah, I mean, businesses will leave. I mean, it has a domino effect. There's a reason why you see Greg Abbott out there on social media begging businesses to move to Texas.
Well, lying.
Right. He lies, but he's out there begging to get businesses to move to Texas. Well, you know what? If businesses were tripping over themselves to move to Texas, you wouldn't have the governor out there begging them to do it. You know why you're begging? You're begging him because you've created basically a little theocracy with inside of the United States. You've created the theocracy of Texas that is run by dominionists.
Yeah.
And
this is very off topic, but a couple of days ago, actually, Abbott was out there saying, well, Texas educates more than 1 in 10 of the nation's public school students. Folks, go ahead and look at what Texas education rankings are. It's not too far behind healthcare or mental health, and those numbers are not good.
No.
We're near the bottom. Okay. And the worst part about that is, and I think everyone around the nation needs to understand this, Texas is one of the largest states. And as one of the largest states, they set the precedence of what educational material is out there for the nation.
Yep.
We are, again, near the bottom. Okay. We're enforcing religious crap in our education. We're removing important educational aspects, which, that's what I thought education was for. And then the material that's being put out because of the changes and because of the mentality here will affect our entire nation.
Yeah, it'll have a domino effect. And that's when I see laws like this, the one that we were talking about, these like invisible anti-abortion borders.
Yeah.
And when they start using terminology like abortion trafficking, that is really disturbing. And sure, if it was only isolated to Texas, then okay, yeah, those of us in Texas, we'd have to deal with it and figure out, do we want to stay here? But the problem that we're running into is you see shit in Texas, you see shit in Florida. It's like DeSantis and Abbott have this ongoing contest between each other about who can be the biggest dictator of their state. But then you see the other states start to follow because they see, okay, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And so we become like the testing ground for what will pass in other states that are not as conservative or don't have dominionists running them, where we don't even have the chance. As a citizen, we have never had an opportunity in Texas to vote on abortion. The legislators did it for us, So they never even put it on the ballot. And they'll say, oh, well, we put it on the ballot by putting the legislators on the ballot. And that kind of goes back to that's a bullshit argument.
Right.
Put it on the ballot if you want us to be able to vote on it and see where it falls. It'll lose,
Yeah, it should be up to the constituents regardless. And if the constituents don't agree, and overwhelmingly, again and again, granted, the timetable for when they believe abortion should be limited varies from wildly in all circles. But the fact is, everyone agrees that it should be up to the individual for the most part. There are always outliers. And that's something that they're going to have to wrestle with themselves. Why do you feel like it's okay for you to push your personal beliefs on other people? And I don't just mean religious. If morally you just feel that it's repugnant for people to have an abortion, that's your right to have that opinion. But why do you feel like it's okay to then decide for someone who's not you what they will and will not have to deal with in their life when you're not going to deal with it financially, you're not going to deal with it physically, and you're not going to deal with it psychologically at any point in your life?
Yeah. I mean, they don't even want to. They go against raising taxes to help out schools. Well, where the fuck do you think these children wind up going?
We have such an underserved system from top to bottom. Education, healthcare, mental health stuff, it should be umbrellaed in it, but it's usually not even part of the healthcare conversation for whatever the fuck reason. Then you've got social programs. People are trying to take away lunch programs for kids. You want starving kids to learn? Can you explain to me how that's going to work? We don't have living wages. How are people supposed to supply the needs for their kids? Food, all that stuff. We don't want to provide childcare. Again, how are people supposed to work? And when these states do this, it's easy for some of us from a point of privilege to say, well, I'm just going to move.
Yeah.
The majority of people can't just up and move. House prices are ridiculous. Interest rates are ridiculous. Many people who could have qualified for a home before cannot qualify for a home now. So what do you want people to realistically do? We are all dealing with this in different ways, and it is going to impact people across the nation. And we have to think about what kind of a nation do we want to live in as a whole, because it's not just Texas, it's not just Florida or Oklahoma or all the freaking southern states that are still fighting the same war from a different front. It's all of us together who suffer.
Yeah, and like you said, even if, let's say, take our situation, let's say we could move to a different state. Can our children move? And do we want to leave our children? So it's not just, oh, well, if you don't like it, move, because it's not just, oh, okay, well, we'll just pack our house up and hopefully we can qualify for another house or something like that. But if you can, what about the rest of your family? You know, it's like leaving your children behind the lines in a war zone. It's just
that's not realistic. And you know, I would never want to leave them. And we've had those discussions in our home, like many of you probably have in yours. And what is the right thing to do? We are well past the point in our lives where we can just up and move everybody and it's fine and we'll just start over again. That's disturbing for kids regardless, even if you can do it. You know, they have to restart their entire life, and it's at integral points in development where they're learning about friendships and community, and you're really affecting them if you have to do that. It's a good thing if it's dangerous. It's worth the risk if you know that they're going to be put at risk. I definitely feel for trans individuals and parents of trans children, because they will not be allowed to have care in many places. And that does mandate you finding another way to live in another place where you get support, because this is not a safe place for them anymore.
Texas is not, Florida is not. There's many states that are not, and they're just falling like dominoes.
And so in those cases, I do hope that there are programs to help individuals. I know there are some, but when you're forced, because you cannot get the care you as an individual need, when you are forced to leave, there is really not an option. It's either take care of your loved one or, you know, suffer whatever consequences may come. That's not realistic. So when you're forced to leave, that's different. But when you can stay, or when you're obligated because you have other loved ones who you don't want to leave behind, like you mentioned, you know, what are you supposed to do?
According to them, you're just supposed to suck it up and deal with their ideology, and they're allowed to just push their ideology. And you brought up a good point about other ideology, because I've actually asked Christian nationalists this question. You know, I was like, okay, the demographics in the United States are changing. And so you right now are okay pushing your religious ideology on people. Let's say 10 years down the road, the demographics in this country have changed, and now there's a new majority religion that, let's say, outlaws alcohol. Are you going to be okay with that? Because you set the standard. You set the standard with this, and their answer is, oh, that won't happen. Okay. Well, when you come out of Never Never Land and actually enter the real world, it can and it eventually will. Every country has changed, you know.
Oh, yeah, historically. But there are other countries that used to have a lot of freedoms that we today still have. There were a lot of other countries that no longer have them, and it happened swiftly and abruptly. And then it was a long claw for those that could regain some of them, and others went even further backwards, to the point where people who once thought it was a great idea are now like, holy crap, what did I do?
Yeah. That's the point I try and make too, is, you know, you think it's going to be this great utopia that, oh, we'll live under the laws and ideologies that I have. Yeah, you'll start out that way. But in order to keep these things, they get more and more extreme. And you can just look through history. It is a pattern. It's the way that they hold power. And then eventually people you love, maybe it's not you, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your brother, your sister, your parents. Somebody steps over one of those new more radical ideology. You know, for you, it's now become radical. And then they're suffering because of it. And then you're looking around saying, holy shit, this isn't what I signed up for. Yes, it is. It's exactly what you signed up for.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's upsetting on a lot of different fronts. It's concerning, you know, as we end this legislative session and begin to move into another one, you know, we have to think about where we are heading as a society. And even though we all may have differences, and we should, I think differences allow us to grow as people, recognizing why we feel a certain way about those differences, challenging our own preconceived notions, and looking at how we can benefit one another regardless of how we might feel. I can still respect someone who is completely on the polar opposite of me, unless it comes down to things like A person's right to exist. That's non-negotiable. A person's right to their own bodily autonomy and decisions about their body. Non-negotiable. Okay? Those things are not going, like, I'm not open to debate on that. I will not have respect for you because you've shown respect for no one else other than yourself.
The minute you start pushing your ideology on me, like as enforcing it,
or anyone, honestly,
or anyone else, then I'm done. You know, I can respect and I can have, and I love having conversations about theological conversations and all of that sort of stuff. I could literally sit on a Bible study and I would have no problem, as long as there was an understanding that you can't push this shit through laws. That's when then I'm going to start having some pretty vicious arguments with you.
Live your beliefs that you've chosen for your life yourself. Do that. I support you 100%.
Yep.
Do not try to make me or other people live by your faith. That's your faith. That's your business.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we thought we'd talk. I know we talked about abortion before, and we'll talk about it again because, you know, it's something that, you know, we're dealing with. But these invisible sort of borders, when we saw this article, you know, when you read it to me yesterday, I was like, oh, shit, we have got to talk about this. I mean, because this is fucking scary.
Yeah, but as someone that has personally received abortive care, it's something that everyone has a right to pursue for whatever the hell reason. You don't have to have a freaking normal reason according to society. People are like, well, if it was healthy and you're... No, nobody's obligated to bring a life into the world, whatever your freaking thoughts might be around it. No one is obligated. There's so much more to it. And that's up to each person individually to decide for themselves. So that's something I am passionate about because it's something I personally have experienced and it's something I support. I have all daughters. Every one of them has that same right. I will bring them wherever they need to go. I will do whatever I need to do. If they choose to enact that right for their body, that's what's going to happen. Come hell or high water, I will help them get whatever care they need.
Yeah, well, and it's sad because right now a corpse has more rights to their body than a woman.
What the fuck is that?
You know, because in order to remove organs from a corpse, you have to have permission from that person. And, you know, of course, they can't give permission when they're dead. So you have to have the permission, you know, on their driver's license or something like that.
Or medical proxy.
Right. But without that permission, a corpse has more control and more say over their body than a woman who is pregnant right now.
Yeah.
I should rephrase that. Than a person who is pregnant right
because
now.
I'm sorry, y'all can cry about it if you don't agree, but trans men are men. Trans men can absolutely get pregnant, and they do not have any obligation any more than anyone else to follow that through. If they want to, go for it.
Yeah. And every once in a while I slip and I'll say women. It's just years of habit in the way that I've argued this, but I do try and be conscious now and catch myself. And if I do say something, I will normally try and catch myself and say person.
Yeah, I appreciate that because all individuals that have the ability to become pregnant have the same rights. And I've had this conversation before. True feminism is about challenging things when it comes to gender norms and expectations that inhibit people's rights. That's what I stand for. It will always be what I stand for, and it will be what I will until my last breath. Yeah. But this is just so huge because there are long-standing ramifications. We're essentially enacting a private citizen army to monitor people's travel and to attempt to, you know, just stop people from having the right to decide what's right, you know, their personal body.
So I remember when Roe v. Wade fell, there was a couple videos that started to go out. And, you know, they were going off of the tea leaves that had been written that were touching on this subject. You know, somebody traveling, them getting pulled over because they're trying to leave the state. And people were like, oh, that's extreme. That would never happen. Guess what?
Here we are.
It's happening.
Yeah. Maybe it's not right now the police. Yep. Maybe it's not right now, you know, a border checkpoint between states. But look at what they're saying. They said, oh, if we get abortion off the books, we would never take away contraception. Right. We believe that, you know, each family has the right to their own reproductive decisions. Each individual has the right to their own reproductive choices. You know, just not abortion. That's just, it's not fair. Okay, so what are they talking about now, folks? Take a look around. IUDs are evil and horrible, and birth control is horrible, and, you know, condoms are a good option, but, you know, at the end of the day, there's things about that are concerning, and then they go into the...
Sex should be about procreation only.
Dude, screw you. I'm sorry, but sex is normal. It is beneficial to your health, to your well-being, to your relationship. It's a bonding exercise. It helps with your heart, stress.
It's fucking fun.
It's fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not a slut or a horrible person because you enjoy having sex, and you don't have to be in a committed relationship to have healthy consensual sex.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're attacking all manners of different ways of life. And your way of life is yours. If you respect other individuals and you're using consent, I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own life.
Yep. As long as you're an adult and there's consent there, I don't care. And on the flip side of that, if you're somebody who, is doesn't enjoy sex, that's fine too. Yeah. That is your choice.
You don't have to ever have sex.
Yep. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about choice. It is each individual's choice, what they want to do, how they want to do it, and as long as they are consenting adults.
Yeah. It always cracks me up because people are like, well, you're pushing your personal ideology on people when you do these things. Okay,
by
my
choice?
personal ideology being do what you want as long as you're not harming another human being, and invading their individual rights as a person. Oh no. That's awful. So you can do whatever you want, literally whatever you want, as long as you're not harming another individual and breaching their consent.
Yeah. So choice is a bad thing.
And, I go out there, you go out there. There's a lot of things we think should just be legal and have the same legal protections. I'm one of those people. You're one of those people. Sex work is work. They should have legal protections. They should be able to actually hold a business license and have a job and have all the safeties around that. There's so many things that come down to personal choice that I just think do your thing. It's your life to live.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think we've covered this.
Beat this one to death.
Yeah, I think we beat this one, but it's an important one to really acknowledge and see what's happening. You have to open your eyes. And sitting in the corner, I say it all the time, sitting in the corner with your thumb up your ass doing nothing is doing nothing. That is still an action.
Well, and at the time of this recording, we're coming up on yet another large, election year. I'm not telling you how to vote. I will never tell you how to vote. But what I will tell you is...
Go vote.
Go vote. And think about, again, what is your vote for? And I wish we were in a country that had two parties. I really do. I wish we had a lot more representation and a lot more choices. But I want you to consider, choosing not to participate is giving the vote to somebody else. And it may be somebody else that you wouldn't want to live under. So you have an obligation to yourself, to the future that you're creating, to go out there and learn about who's up for election, what they stand for. And it's tricky because we have people that keep flipping sides, but do the best you can and just vote for a future that you can actually be proud of.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect note to leave this on. So thank y'all for your time. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.